Brace the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. Start converting your B2B audience today. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started today at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
I'm bullish on it. I really am. I have to be. There is a lot of, there's the downsides of TV stations that are closing down. I see the reasons why. The audience changed, the clients have changed. Town suffers more when they don't have a local news entity. All the research that shows local newsrooms are still way more trusted than national media. I think they need to stick with what great journalism.
This is Small Press, Big Ideas, a podcast about the business of local news in the United States. I'm your host, Paul Gewertz. Small Press, Big Ideas is about the opportunities and challenges that local news publishers are facing for their businesses. I'll sit down and talk with journalists, entrepreneurs, nonprofit leaders, and more in the local news industry to find out what's working, what isn't, and how the local news ecosystem can innovate and flourish in the 21st century. All right, today on the podcast, I'm joined by Mario Orellana. He's the founder's chief strategist of MO Media Company. I'm not sure how you pronounce that one. I should have asked that.
No, you got it.
And goes back a ways in the local news, local media space. So we connected on LinkedIn. Thanks, Mario. Great to meet you. Thanks for joining me, man.
Great to meet you. Yeah, thanks for having me. I told you, I've become an instant fan of this podcast, and so glad you're doing it.
Yeah, it's great to hear. It really does give me the warm and fuzzies inside. Could you just kind of set the stage? I ask everybody to start. Just talk about a little bit about your background, your story in local media. Give us a baseline. Yeah.
I have a kind of a rare story because I spent my entire career with one news station, which is rare. It doesn't happen.
That is rare from the folks I've talked to. Yeah.
And I, spent it all here at KSAT, as the ABC affiliate here in San Antonio. And which was owned by, when I first started, Post Newsweek, which then morphed into Graham Media, Captain Graham, the Graham family. Mm-hmm. So it was quite the legacy. I go back. Let's go back to 1995. I was still in high school. I was an editor at my school paper. And I was really trying to challenge myself to find the next thing. And I was probably back in the 90s looking for an internship, which back then meant free labor. TV stations were just take anybody in. But I showed up at the TV station. What was funny was I was going to kind of apply at a few TV stations. I couldn't find parking at the station, which was KMOL, which is now WOAI here. I couldn't find parking, so I kept driving and said, well, I'll go to KSAT instead. And threw my hat in the ring and just said, hey, do you guys do internships? And they're like, yeah, come on in.
Oh, nice.
They said, call this number at like 6 p.m. because I wanted to do sports producing. And the sports director would be in around 6:30. So it was like getting a girl's phone number. Like, do I call right at 6:30? Do I call, when do I call? And I called and he said, yeah, come on in. We need help with, high school football and everything. So I 17, this was like March of 95. I go into a newsroom and, you got to remember the time period, the 90s. To see a newsroom, every market's the same, where there's these people who we've only seen on TV, and here I am in the same room with them, not saying a word. I'm just, and I'm thinking this is a lot. And, I fell in love with just from there, although I was overwhelmed, intimidated. The first major news event I saw was how the newsroom handled the death of Selena, which was obviously huge news in San Antonio. It happened, down the street in Corpus Christi, and she was a huge figure here in San Antonio that I saw a newsroom, one of my first indoctrinations into a newsroom was just that. I kind of just, was there just kind of observing, and it got too real. I kind of left. But the sports director called me up a few months later and said, "Hey, would you like to come back like in an official internship role? Still not paid. They didn't pay people in the 90s." And I stuck around from sports producer, part-time sports producer, which back then meant, 50, 60 hours a week and not getting paid for that part, to news editor, tape to tape, analog days, and then news producer, which is where I really fell in love with the process of journalism. Sports journalism was a great baseline. News producing is where, if you were to describe what a news producer does, a line producer, I put it in a 3-word sentence. I'll clean it up for this podcast, but get stuff done. That's essentially what it is. And I learned that and worked my way up to a news director. I was named news director in 2023. So from a 1995 to 23 journey, the news industry shifted and I could see the shift. And after a 30-year career, I thought, there was an opportunity to move on from a newsroom, and I decided to take it. I was a recruiter with Grand Media for a while, and but they phased that, so I'm no longer with Grand Media. And that's kind of my believe it or not, short version of my journey. But I had to make a choice early on in my career because I was at 19 I became a dad. While I was studying communications journalism in school, I had to make a choice. You start my career now with a news station, or go to school. And with a child on the way, I'm so glad I took that leap of faith. I regret not going back to school, but as we kind of talk about this conversation, you'll see how I made amends to that. When it becomes learning literally on the job my entire career about journalism.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, people sometimes make a big deal about not going back to school or whatever. Like the apprenticeship model, which is kind of what you did, coming up through there and everything. That's becoming a huge thing again, like in broader culture outside of just the media industry. I was just reading something the other day about how how I forgot what industry it was talking about. Something they're just going all apprenticeship because they can get quality, smart people out of school, get them, earning an income from the get go. It's just, I'm a fan of that. So after coming out of the kind of career story you told us, tell me about MO Media Co. Pretty new kind of venture. What are you doing with that project? Is that your initials, by the way? MO.
It is MO, but of course, modus operandi too.
Yeah, that's right. I like that. Yeah.
And also, you're kind of beholden to the state LLC, name. There's a lot of, so you have to negotiate to get your name kind of thing. You go, perfect. I love it. The first thing I thought when I was out of a newsroom was, how do I get back in one? And I still see myself in a position where I could be part of a newsroom's ecosystem if as a consultant or a news directing again. But I thought, if there's an opportunity to start something on my own, this is it. I'm never going to have this opportunity again. And the thing that you see when you hear journalists who are no longer out of a newsroom, after a month of decompressing, because you need time to go, that was a ride. You still go, I'm a storyteller at heart, and I'm an authentic storyteller at heart. I found a lot of comforts in marketing world. And one of the first organizations that reached out was the American Marketing Association, the San Antonio chapter. And getting with them, a lot of former journalists have gone that route, with PR, branding, but there's that, of that remains of telling a story, because we know this in the news industry and people know this in the marketing. They know pandering, they know when people are just, trying to pander to an audience, and the audience is craving authentic, true storytelling. That's where journalists come in. I always kind of joke, that's why we're so much fun at parties, because we poke holes in everything, and we cut through the BS, and we do all that. And I it seemed like a natural. So that's a little what my company is doing. My team of one right now, myself. So chief, strategist, CEO, I clean the place. I do it all, but I'm also pivoting a lot. And a lot of what I'm doing when it comes to media consultation, brand strategy, I'm allowing myself ways to pivot ideas that have even been sparked by this podcast, of hearing journalists in their post-newsroom life, the ideas are coming and going, oh, that's a great idea. That's a great way to pivot. And I think it's no matter what, you go back to authentic storytelling and you're going to be a success. So, that's where I'm centering. I'd like to remain in a newsroom ecosystem as a consultant because I feel like there's a lot of things I still have to share. As part of 30 years in the newsroom, I learned a lot, and I am a strong advocate for local journalism. And I like you, feel like we need to keep this system going because, it's all a lot of cities. That's all they got, when it comes to the main source of news. So I'm a big, strong advocate for it.
Let me ask you another question. So I kind of went off on a tangent a bit ago about the apprenticeship model. And also you had mentioned on your LinkedIn, I think I saw that you'd sourced and mentored aspiring journalists. It sounds like you were kind of one of those at one point.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious, as a burgeoning consultant, however you want to refer to yourself.
I like that. I think burgeoning consultant.
Yeah. One thing I hear a lot from like publishers on this show is how hard it is to find talent. So yes. when you say you've mentored aspiring journalists and brought people up, what's something to look out for that's like a green flag, if you will, when you're looking at young people trying to get into the space? Does that make sense, that question?
100%. And I was thinking about that in so many ways. I've been a recruiter my entire career, even when I wasn't in the management role, because you could recognize, those who have those critical thinking skills,
right.
The curiosity, and the ability to find the angle that no one else in the room can find. I have been very fortunate to attend so many conferences, and I'm still a member of NAHJ, Hispanic Journalists, NABJ, Black Journalists, and I attend a lot of the conferences. And it's, to kind of start with more of the red flags, meeting so many talented people. There's so much talent there, but there's so much burnout. People are burnt out when it comes to everything that the newsroom they've worked these careers, they're looking for their next steps, but they're a little burnt out. And so, the candidates that I've talked to that still, are open about, that they want something better, they want to remain in news, I challenge them and say, hey, you need to question the newsrooms that you interview them as much as they're interviewing you. What's the newsroom culture like? Does the newsroom have an AI policy? What's the crime guidelines? Things like that, because you don't want to get into a situation where you're not happy. I think newsrooms have to have that transparency that they have to the public, to their employees as well. I think those are the big things. As far as mentoring, that's always going to be a part of my DNA because I was the recipient of so much. And one of the things that I've been able to do, and I'm very proud of, is help teach a class at the very college that I dropped out of at San Antonio College. I was able to teach 3 classes and help them get a real world television newsroom experience with my old station of KSAT, where they were able to produce content that was broadcast. So, teaching the things that I've come across, outside of a newsroom as a viewer, kind of taking on a different lens, and also looking at, the benefits and the risks of AI, the audience and the shifting way that they're looking. I mean, being real, and it was great because they are like sponges, and so I know there's still a lot of, talent and a lot of people wanting to become local journalists. I think newsrooms need to be able to reciprocate and, provide that newsroom culture to help cultivate and grow.
Zootopia 2 has come home to Disney+.
Let's go!
Get ready for a new case.
We're the greatest partners of all time!
New friends.
Gary the Snake.
And your last name?
The Snake.
Dream Team. New habitats.
Zootopia has a secret reptile population.
You can watch the record-breaking phenomenon at home. Zootopia 2, now available on Disney+, rated PG. And right now you can get Disney+ and Hulu for just $4.99 a month for 3 months with a special limited time offer. Ends March 24th. After 3 months, plan auto renews at $12.99 a month. Terms apply.
Yeah, culture is super important. I've worked in some amazing companies and some super toxic ones, and you kind of learn how to sniff that stuff out.
I've heard
not necessarily
culture. Yeah, eat strategy for breakfast is one of my favorite.
Yeah, I have heard that. That's a good one. Yeah. So well, here, I was going to ask you something else, but you brought up the AI piece. So let's talk about it, because I have to ask every single person, because it's 2026. What are your kind of broader thoughts on AI? You're different than most, because you were at a TV station for so long. I haven't had many TV folks on. It's supposed to have been like print and like digital, but so maybe you have a different answer, maybe not. I don't know. What are your overall thoughts on it? And were you guys using anything there, or using anything now at your consultancy, or yeah?
Both, yes. Now, I'll start with the newsroom. Graham Media has a very, I think, great relationship with AI. They're pushing for newsrooms to use it wisely. And when I was in a news director role, we put our collective heads together and we talked about it. What, this seems so long ago. It was probably like a year and a half ago.
Right.
We talked about it. And after we got through kind of the risks, of which there are many, that you've talked about, on this podcast, and things that are obvious when it comes to generative, when it comes to, hallucinatory, making up information, essentially, the things, it just can't replace judgment, but using it as a tool is just imperative. Our newsrooms are going to get left in the dust. I've heard legend of news director who didn't allow spell check into their newsroom, back in the day.
Yeah.
Which, because every journalist should know how to spell and grammar, and spoiler alert, we don't, So I think when we were putting our heads together to come up with a company-wide policy, it's funny because we at first were, pearl clutching, going, oh my goodness, this is going to replace jobs and everything. And I don't think that's the case. I think I've heard so many great examples of, newsrooms scaling up when it comes to large data sets, when it comes to transcribing press conferences. It's never going to replace boots on the ground, but look at the ways that it can be helpful, but know the risks. And you don't fall for the things that are becoming less and less obvious when it comes to image use, because
they are getting better. Yeah.
It's scary. But the only way to do that is to fully understand it. There's a literacy part to this, And I think if a newsroom doesn't have a newsroom policy yet, get one. And look at companies like Wired, who had one of the first ones, I think, AP and their newsroom policy that use it. Now with my company and when I'm looking at ideas for, like, let's just say newsletter, when it comes to niche marketing and niche storytelling, it becomes very useful. It's helpful in putting together, an outline of a plan that would take, hours, weeks, to do. It puts it all in front of you. No one, don't follow it set, word by word, go in there and go, okay, that doesn't work with this and that, but use it as your best assistant. Don't use it as anything more than that. Right? It's become uber useful. Also, the risks, if I haven't talked about the risks enough, because I was asked this question last week and I was overthinking, going, did I talk about the risks enough? I think that's going to be, we can't talk about those enough, but you have to talk about the benefits of it.
Yeah. And I agree with the middle of the road kind of way of looking at it is what I agree. Like the pearl clutching, you can't be a Luddite. Like, for example, like there's a bunch of people in my circles where they're eliminating cursive in schools now. And people are doing that thing, the pearl clutching thing. I'm like, that's too bad, but I can't tell you last time I wrote in cursive. Like, come on now. Is this necessary in 2026 for these kids to learn? You know what I mean?
It's
stuff
weird.
Like that.
I've been writing in cursive lately. I don't know why.
Oh, really?
I don't know. It's coming back to me. I have the worst penmanship, so I think I have a fighter's chance when I write with cursive. So maybe but I agree. If it went away, it's almost my secret decoder ring. When I write it.
Right. There you go. That's how me and my wife will keep secrets from our kids when they're bigger. We'll write to each other in cursive. And then on the literacy front, the thing that scares me It's not so much that it's getting better. I mean, the AI videos and photos. Like, I have friends in my circle. So I'm 40. I'll be 41 next month. So, like, millennial. And I have friends my same age who will send me stuff on Instagram or something that they clearly are not aware is AI. And it's, like, glaringly obvious. I'm like, dude, you know that there's no way that leopard was chasing that rhino and it reacted. Like, it's ridiculous. Come on, man.
Yes.
And I'm like, it just kind of scares me when you think about the population at large not being, fluent in that stuff.
One of the things I brought up in the class I helped teach at San Antonio College was, and this was a blip on the radar, I think, and it's already forgotten. It's a little scary when there was an image of what was an explosion outside of the Pentagon. And I don't remember the context, but it circulated in a matter of hours, and it sent stock markets down.
Crazy.
It's that weird, but I brought that up to the class, and even and I attributed to articles saying those things because I want to make sure I was getting that correct. And you look at that kind of real world consequences of that. Look, I got fooled by the bunnies jumping on the trampoline. It was the cutest video I'd ever seen. But the real world consequences of it, are scary. And there is no one better equipped than journalists who can use their BS meter to see through. It's getting harder. I know that, but I mean, it's incumbent upon us, journalists to do so.
Yeah. I didn't expect our conversation going that way, but that's good. That's really good stuff. Because some good clips in there. Good clips in there. I got to feed the algorithm.
I speak in sound bites. I try to speak in sound bites.
Benefits of a background in TV, right?
Exactly.
So I've been asking. Yeah, totally. I've been asking this question to everybody. So if you kind of binge some of the thing, you probably know it. But flash forward 5 years, where do you see the local news industry at large? Maybe talk about TV in particular, since I think you're probably the first person from a solid TV background. Yeah. Where do you see it going? Where do you see it headed? Where do you see the trends? So what are your thoughts on that?
I'm bullish on it. I really am. I have to be. And there is a lot of, there's the downsides of TV stations that are closing down, and, I see the reasons why, the audience changed, the clients have changed when it comes to their method of getting their, ad buys out. It's not just, I came from a world when you were getting 20 shares. I mean, we were the only game in town. Those days are long gone. But when it's all said and done, I think newsrooms, have to survive this, because I heard this in my binging of this podcast. Town suffers more when they don't have a local news entity. It costs them more in the long run. And all the research that shows local newsrooms are still way more trusted than national media. I think they need to stick with what great journalism. They need to, weather the storms. I did, a lot of people before me did, and be more flexible and change don't be afraid to not report solely on crime. I used to hate hearing, with TV, if it bleeds, it leads. But it's true sometimes. I hated that we were addicted to that. Add context to it. Go out. It may sound counterintuitive to, being a news director and being in the news. I have become more entrenched in my community being outside of a newsroom than I ever was in, because I was so insulated, with research and all the things that I needed to do. And I never just sat and had a conversation with people. And that's what I'm doing right now in this post life. And I think newsrooms would be smart to go out to neighborhood association meetings, go out to meetings and without a camera and just talk to people and take that to the newsroom. You're a member of this community as much as they are. And, I think if the regular viewer sees more and more news organizations doing that, the trust is only going to build. The storytelling is going to build. So I think all those things, there has to be a blueprint, but if you stick with the same old, just format, then you're going to continue to lose audience. But I think there's very smart people in our industry that's going to figure that part out.
Man, I agree. I'm also bullish. You had some great takes in there. I've never heard that one before, that you've become more connected to your community since leaving the newsroom. That you're more insulated there. That's awesome. Another clip, another soundbite. That's a really intriguing kind of take on it, but it kind of makes sense the way you laid it out.
I appreciate it. Yeah. And I've been saying it more and more out loud lately. And when I say it, I'm like, gosh, I don't ever want to seem like I was not grateful for the time I had in the newsroom, but it's also true. And I think if you talk to a lot of journalists, they would say the same thing. And I also feel like there's so many great journalists who aren't in newsrooms that there's things that can still be, let's band together our talents and figure out how we can still maintain these stories. It's like the thunderbolts of the journalism world. The Avengers.
There we go. I love the Avengers. I need to have AI do an Avengers logo with some local media people who've been on the show. That's great. Mario, this is awesome, man. Where can people find you? What do you want me to link to? If anybody's looking to work with you, like what does that person look like? What can you help them with? Like, tell me all that stuff. Yeah.
As of this writing, best place to find me right now would be LinkedIn. My website is still a work in progress. I hate to admit that out loud, but I want to, you kind of want to do it right, but LinkedIn would be my best. And I have one for me and for ML Media. And the best way to reach out to me. And I'm going to be posting more and more of my thoughts on everything, when I talked about and services that I provide. So, man, I appreciate this.
Yeah, perfect, man. This is really good stuff. All right, Mario, great meeting you. This is fun, man.
Great meeting you, Paul. Thank you.
I'll let you go. You have a good weekend, and we'll talk soon.
All right, man. See you.
Cool.
Thank you for listening to Small Press Big Ideas. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to help the show, the best thing you can do is to tell a friend or colleague and just take a few minutes to leave a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening to right now. It only takes a minute out of your day, but it really does help the podcast grow and reach more ears. Check back for new episodes every Monday.
How many discounts does USAA Auto Insurance offer? Too many to say here. Multi-vehicle discount, safe driver discount, new vehicle discount, storage discount, legacy.
How many discounts will you stack up? Tap the banner or visit USAA.com/auto discounts. Restrictions apply.